That concludes the presentation. I'd like to thank you. And as I said, we're prepared to take some questions. There's a podium with a microphone right in the center. So if you do have a question, I would encourage you to come up to the podium. And please help yourself. There's a podium with a microphone right in the center. So if you do have a question, I would encourage you to come up to the podium. And please help yourself to the tea and coffee at the back of the room. So any questions?
Carl, thanks for the thorough explanation. A couple of questions from me. I'm wondering the impact on the north and south side of the traffic impacted.
Well, in both cases, there will be no buildings impacted. For example, the CP station that is there today will not be impacted. And on the north side with the shoe fly that happened, no impact on buildings. Other questions?
Yeah, hi. Yeah, thanks. That was quite informative. North of the tracks, you mentioned that parking would be prohibited on the north side of Harbourfront Drive. So obviously you've given some thought to traffic patterns, because some of those roads are presently wondering what the capability is of accepting increased traffic. Right now, I think the area where Ross Street would come up north of the tracks, there's a big empty lot there where overflow parking. So I'm assuming traffic would either turn left or turn right to get to either the wharf or the thrift shop in that area. So maybe you could just speak to your research and thoughts about that. Either the wharf or the thrift shop in that area. So maybe you could just speak to your research and thoughts about that.
Sure. Well, traffic is definitely going to increase on those roads. There's no way around it. And traffic to the water.
To your research and thoughts about that.
Sure. Well, traffic is definitely going to increase on those roads. There's no way around it. And traffic to the waterfront will come up Ross Street and turn right on Harbourfront Drive. And this is the reason why we're going to be removing all parking on Ross Street on the east and west side, and remove parking on the north side of Harbourfront Drive to allow two-way traffic to occur. But I acknowledge the issue that the traffic pattern will change in that area. There's just no way around.
Not just during Wednesday at the wharf, but anytime the Prestige has an event, parking overflows totally, and there's new construction happening there right now, so there will be more people parking on the streets. So that empty lot, which I think is scheduled for
at options of providing communal parking in addition to what we already have. But I'm not really at liberty to talk about that much, because it would involve property negotiations. The vacant lot that you're talking about, but I'm not really at liberty to talk about that much, because it would involve property negotiations. The vacant lot that you're talking about, where some overflow parking happens today, of course, is privately owned. So we really have no control. The vacant lot that you're talking about, where some overflow parking happens today, of course, is privately owned. So we really have no control over what's going to happen there as far as public parking.
Okay.
there as far as public parking.
Okay. I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
I will. Wait, Adams Lake Indian Band, and that was a great presentation. It's my first time that I've ever seen the full-blown presentation, and I think that on behalf of the councils and especially Adams Lake Band, that we request a presentation to our band. Main reason is because we're with part of Adams Lake Band is within the municipality. And if you can remember that we've been asking for support for underpass tragedies on that highway. It's a Trans-Canada highway we're talking about. So I'm here to ask for your support when we stand up and we want an underpass over there. We've been promised an underpass, but those are only words right now. So I'm looking for crossing. I am nervous, really nervous, but I'm here for safety in my community. And my community has been asking for support and work to get that crossing into a real safe. If you take a look, Sandy Point, Glen Echo, and Pierce Point are the only campgrounds we have. So we have a lot of people that come into our community in the summer, a lot of tourists that come into the city to support you, and all the businesses and everything. So we're asking, so we have a lot of people that come into our community in the summer, a lot of tourists that come into the city to support you, and all the businesses and everything. So we're asking, we want your support. So when we're standing out there, when I'm standing out there, and I've been asked by my community to support you, and all the businesses and everything. So we're asking, we want your support. So when we're standing out there, when I'm standing out there, and I've been asked by my community to protect and stand on that road and protest for and over our underpass. I'm gonna do it this summer, with or without. We're gonna do it because safety is a real concern. It takes 20 minutes in the summer to get on that highway. We're within the municipality. We should have been a part of that community strategic plan. And the band, Adams Lake Band, Chief and Council, have been asking, we're tired of asking. This year is our priority, is over our underpass that needs to be there. Thank you very much for listening.
To a band council meeting to make this same presentation. Of course, the Adams Lake Band has contributed to the Ross Street Underpass project through the payment of development cost charges over the years. So I completely acknowledge what you're saying. Thank you very much.
Underpass where it would go, temporary, and then you'd do another one east. Why not just do the one east and then forget about spending all that money for doing it twice?
Well, the shoe fly diversion will be east and west of Ross Street.
Do you need two? Can they not just have
That location.
Are you going to leave the one west of town after you're finished construction?
Well, there is no existing shoe fly
Or
diversion.
the hot box?
Oh, I see. I would ask Mr. Lavecchio if maybe he could comment on that.
As you know, there is the Salmon Arm siding begins roughly right at Marine Park Drive and extends east around the point. That's a meet location for us. Siding begins roughly right at Marine Park Drive and extends east around the point. That's a meet location for us for trains. And so it has to be extended on the east end of the siding because during construction we will lose. That's that's a meet location for us, for trains. And so it has to be extended on the east end of the siding because during construction, we will lose approximately, Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's roughly 1,000 feet of siding capacity during the 2 years of construction.
West there, and make it all down on the east side here. When it's all
You're
finished.
suggesting push the siding even further east.
Just east, yes. And that way it's not getting all congestion all down there.
The cost of relocation to the greatest extent possible for obvious reasons.
Yep.
And so in doing it this way, we don't have to look at, if you go to the east end, you're getting very close to additional properties that were quite, so we had a very compact footprint in which to work, and this was the option which the experts identified.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jim Kimmerly, Chairperson for Plan for Prosperity. Good job on the presentation, Carl. I've got prosperity. Good job on the presentation, Carl. I've got two questions, and one first on the Ross Street underpass. Has there been a traffic study done to measure the impact of how that's going to work when the underpass is completed? Completed.
Thanks, Jim. There has been some preliminary study done, and that's why, for example, we know there will not be an intersection built at Lakeshore and Ross. It'll be a four-way. But there's been a preliminary study done is the answer, and I'm wondering if Jen Wilson cares to comment on that.
Yes, the engineer on the project, the multidisciplinary team, they did get some traffic engineers to look at how any of the lane markings were determined by that traffic report. Their suggestions to remove parking along Marine Park, Harbourfront, that came from that study. The one thing I would comment on, just to be clear, is there has been some because it wasn't on the books at the time. So there is some interest to look at it in more detail, but they did look at what that change would bring. There's not really any concerns from that traffic study other than removing the parking to allow better traffic flow.
And when that was looked at, was it done?
You're challenging my memory, sorry. I don't remember when they did it, but we do have traffic counts for many reasons along that area because we have done a lot of improvements at Marine Park and Lakeshore because of Transport Canada over the years. So they had traffic counts from many different times throughout the last sort of 5 to 6 years. The study was done, but I do know they had some good information.
Yeah, because the summer would be the time to measure that for sure.
Absolutely.
The other one is on the 4th Street overpass, the one drawing that was done in 2009. And Carl, you made a comment, you said it wasn't feasible. Can you explain what that means? Explain what that means.
Yeah, I would ask Jen to comment on that as well.
Sure. So if you look at I'm not sure we can pull it up here, but the way that they've shown it on there, they did just a center line grading, and it swung around quite heavily. The grades coming down to meet quite heavily. The grades coming down to meet the existing road network were at 12%, and they actually go straight into the intersection. So there was no relief for a proper, safe slope coming in, doing your proper road design. 12% is extremely steep, and it would be even 12% is extremely steep, and it would be even worse than that once you added your proper relief in for intersection safety. So they really didn't go much further than that. And when you're building a bridge at the angle that was shown in those design drawings, it is extremely expensive because you're either cast in place really wide to do that, or you're getting these. Anyway, it would be very, very expensive to do. Sorry.
I appreciate that answer. That's great. But my understanding is the cost of that overpass, if it was put into play, would be very similar to the cost of the.
Sorry. We didn't go into it in much more detail, more due to the grade infeasibility rather than the cost. The cost would be, if the costs were estimated fairly similar, they may be fairly similar, but realistically, it's just not possible due to the grade issues. It was at 12% without relief, so you sort of equivalent to the worst part of Okanagan, which would not be very safe in the winter.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Hello, my name is Mary Lynn McCausland. I got a couple of questions. Bite. The first one deals with the fact that there are basically right now 2 accesses across the bridge that is sort of within the city. Now, I'm not great on our geography here, so I'm still a new person. I haven't lived here 20 years yet. I understand that's what you have to do to be a real. I do have a concern about cutting off for a year, or as the CP rail person said, 2 years of construction, one of those in the area of safety with a major hotel and so much development for residences on that side. And if there is much development for residences on that side, and if there is a major emergency, then we're down to 1 crossing. And I'm wondering what contingency plans you're making to be able to handle the situation in the event of emergency. God forbid that it ever happen.
I'm not sure.
God forbid that it ever happen.
I'm not sure I'm quite clear on the question, ma'am. I think you're saying that access to the waterfront will be cut off during construction, essentially?
Well, one of the areas to the roads in front of the Prestige and all the way down to the housing complex, you access it from you come Lakeshore, you make your left and you go across the tracks and you end up with the buildings on the left and the Prestige down at the end and the Marine Park. If you church thrift store. So those are the only 2? What
Yes.
happens if you cut one of those off and you have a major emergency? You only have one way across. So that causes a bit of a bottleneck in a way. What contingency do you have if there's a major emergency to where it needs to be, or people out of there if you need to get them out of there?
Well, there's no doubt, ma'am, that access is going to be cut off or diminished during construction. There's simply no way around that. But that happens today. Cut off or diminished during construction. There's simply no way around that. But that happens today. The waterfront is cut off with trains all the time or with accidents. So this is a long-term solution. But that happens today. The waterfront is cut off with trains all the time or with accidents. So this is a long-term solution to address that. But I acknowledge your point that it will create challenges during construction. Thank you.
Well, you need to do something.
It will create challenges during construction. Thank you.
Well, you need to do something. So I recognize that because it is a liability with the trains blocking those 2 access points. So you really can't develop much over on the north side under those circumstances without putting a lot of people at risk. So you do have to do to be able to assist people in the event of an emergency.
Yes,
Okay.
your point is well taken. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. The other thing is that I had to smile when you said to the lady that there'll be no impact on buildings during construction. I've been in the construction zone and the drilling and that does.
Well, that would be a matter between the general contractor and the individual property owners through the contractor's insurance. So when I said there was no impact, I meant the buildings won't have to be knocked down for property acquisition, etc.
Okay, all right, good.
My name's Dave Martinuk, and again, congratulations to an excellent presentation, very well researched and informative. And I just wondered why other people have not yet addressed the funding issue, which I propose a two-part question. For the grants which are available for the Ross Street parking, approximately $3,400,000, is that confirmed or is that subject to the whim of existing bureaucracies or political parties or the weather?
Well, thank you, sir. Most of the funding is confirmed. If I had that particular slide up, the $3.4 million grant is federal gas tax grant funding that the city already has. In other words, we've saved it up. That particular slide up, the $3.4 million grant is federal gas tax grant funding that the city already has. In other words, we've saved it up for this project.
Okay.
There are other smaller components where we still need to jump through a few hoops, funding that the city already has. In other words, we've saved it up for this project.
Okay.
There are other smaller components where we still need to jump through a few hoops to get the money, but it's fairly certain.
Okay, thank you. And the second part is that you referred to a generous contribution from CP Rail or CP towards this project of $1 million. In my mind, if I was buying a 50-year-old house in downtown Vancouver, $1 million might be generous for a down payment. He has a vested interest as an interested party, and what body in the CP organization is there to petition for more than $1 million?
Well, sir, it sounds like you're volunteering to help me rough up Mr. Lavecchia. Difficult question, and I would perhaps ask Mike to comment.
Thank you. It's a very fair question to ask, and I appreciate you asking it. We have protected in our capital plan those funds for some years. Obviously, costs escalate over time. Costs that are not evident in the project, which we will incur both operationally and in terms of some of the infrastructure that supports our operation. Those are not project costs, so they are not reflected in those numbers.
So, sir, are you saying that $1 million is not
Project costs that we also incur.
And would you be able to direct appropriate city people to renegotiate that $1 million? Obviously, you're...
I don't know how to answer that.
In my opinion, I just don't feel that a multinational corporation, which you are just a part of, is volunteering sufficient funds when they've had an increase in revenue and projections from their second quarter of 2017.
I will say this on
When they've had an increase in revenue and projections from their second quarter of 2017.
I will say this on that point. There are in excess of 10,000 level crossings in this country on the sea. I will say this on that point. There are in excess of 10,000 level crossings in this country on the CP. We could do nothing but fund crossing upgrades plan, and it would not make the dent that needs to be made. Crossings for CP are the single biggest risk that we face as an operational company that we ourselves do not control. Somebody's decision to beat the train through the crossing and fail our control. In addition to the role I play today at CP, I am also a qualified employee. I have operated trains through Salmon Arm. It can be very daunting. I spent part of the morning this morning doing some safety inspections. While I was there, a couple of trains came through in rapid succession. I was at the Narcisse crossing. Traffic, of course, backed up as the trains passed through. Immediately following the trains passing through, the crossing arms come up. Traffic immediately backed up right onto the tracks. Traffic immediately backed up right onto the tracks. I have to tell you, from an operating perspective, that's the worst feeling in the world. You come around the curve, you have the line of sight, you throw the emergency brake, and what happens? The train starts to stop. Emergency brake, and what happens? The train starts to stop. Does it stop in time? Probably not. And then tragedy occurs. So I think the city deserves credit for recognizing this as part of their planning process. This project we are making a contribution to that project, and I think they deserve credit for doing so.
I'll take that as a yes then, sir. The 1 million is there.
Thank you.
Hi, Warren Gage. Just a question about, appreciate the presentation. Average Joe comes out to these types of events and doesn't have time or can't fit that into their schedule. So I'm wondering, are there other plans other than the open evenings where you can get the information out to the general public? Because if it all hinges on a referendum, and not everyone that's impacted might even people out to show up and actually vote one way or the other to support that, because I believe it is such an important project. Being a business owner in the Harbourfront area, and my office is probably the closest to the whole project. I'm right on the corner in the big red barn, and so we'll be see the impacts of traffic flow and that kind of thing. It's really important. I feel that we get this through.
Thanks, Warren. As I mentioned earlier, there are a number of open houses coming up, and we're also planning to do a social media blitz. We've just hired a part-time. One of her first tasks is to tackle that. We're talking about some other methods besides open houses, because I agree with you, we need to get this information and this message out there so that the citizens can make an informed decision. So thank you for those comments.
I don't understand, is the Narcisse train crossing going to be closed when the underpass is built? Or are you going to have two accesses to the waterfront? Or just the one?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. The Narcisse.
Or just the one?
Yes, thank you, ma'am. The Narcisse crossing will remain even after the underpass is built. There may be some changes as to what kind of traffic is allowed there, but it's going to remain.
This is for CPR. I'm really puzzled between the, if there's underpasses built, then you're saying we won't be required to do a pedestrian overpass and fencing at the end of the trail. I don't see the connection. Underpass happens, then I can still see CPR saying you need an overpass for pedestrians and fencing at the end of the trail. I'm just wondering, I don't see the connection.
Well, as I said earlier, I think it's more of a moral versus a legal commitment. For the millions of dollars a few years ago to extend the siding to the east, the city essentially committed at that time to take steps to stop pedestrians illegally crossing the tracks. And that was one of the methods to achieve that. No, it won't. It won't. I mean, I'm not saying there won't be people crossing the tracks illegally, but that was essentially the deal or the commitment that we made. Yeah.
It's Gina again. I forgot to mention that, or ask the question about the storm drainage. You mentioned that it's going to be storm drainage. You mentioned that it's going to be flowed to the west, which means to the bay, right?
No, Gina, what I was saying is the storm system that is there today, which is a pipe,
Yep, I know.
the storm system that is there today, which is a pipe
Yep,
under
I
the
know.
pavement, is going to be relocated a little bit to the west.
So that's the bay.
No.
Where? Yes.
The outfalls will not be changing. It's
okay.
really just where the water flows. Really just where the water flows near the underpass. It's going to be about 10 feet to the west of where it is today.
Okay.
It goes to the same place though,
Okay.
to the outfall in the lake. Is that correct, Jen? Essentially, yeah.
Okay. I was just saying.
Yeah, understood. Thank you.
That's the way I see it. Yeah, I guess we'd have to talk about water, the water cleanliness, and the water. Period. How we're gonna do all that as a.
Any other questions, folks?
Mark Cantle, I know that you probably were expecting me to ask something.
I knew you were going to get that.
And my question has to do with the referendum. I know that the money is there, and I also know from my years that I spent on council and living in this wonderful community that people that people have a tendency to vote no if they aren't really informed. And I know the city will do its very best, but I wonder why, and I'm going to make a point of asking each individual councillor later, why they won't go for the alternative. Why they won't go for the alternative process. Because the money is in place. It's been in the plan since the 90s and maybe earlier. And it's part of our infrastructure. Like, how are we ever going to link the downtown with the water? No, I've said it to staff many, many times that my biggest fear is with the senior homes on this side, the hotel, and West Harbor Village, and so on, that, it could very easily precipitate a tragedy. And so, and it isn't really for you, but there's councillors here and the mayor, why they wouldn't go for the alternative process. So you don't have to answer, Carl.
Well, I'll comment anyway, Mark. Of course, that's a decision of individual councillors, and as I mentioned earlier, that decision is not. My opinion on it is that if we choose to go the alternative approval process, of course, that means that 10% of the electorate can dictate what will happen. So if 10% of the people come out and vote, and that's about 1,200, it means it has to go to referendum. And it's my considered opinion that that is what it's going to happen, that there will be more than 1,200 people that in fact do that, forcing the city to go to a referendum. So it's my own opinion that this to go right to a referendum. And I see Councillor Harrison wants to comment.
You sure you're not running, Carl? That was a good answer. Yeah, thanks, Mark, for the question, because I know I've been asked that too. Just from my perspective, I'm only one councillor, but the reason I would not go to counter-petition is I think it would fail. The reason I would not go to counter-petition is I think it would fail. Because I think there would be a groundswell of at least 1,200 people who would sign the petition. I think we stand a much better chance of informing people. And I think like people who are here tonight who are informed, they'll be able to make a vote that's reasonable. So we're here tonight who are informed, they'll be able to make a vote that's reasonable. So what we need is we need you, if you've got the information, to help spread the word. Because I think if people know, they'll support it. at least a majority.
I would just add to that, Marg, that the fact is the money is not there. We're $5 million short, so we need to borrow the money.
Not quite done. I know, the reason I said it's there is because I know the arena's being paid, is able to go toward it, and so if there's other sources and so on, but I could be wrong, you know, that maybe it isn't all there, but it's pretty close. And I was surprised because I thought it was like 600,000 that went yearly to pay for the, no?
No, it's for 460 or so, I believe.
She does such a good job that I thought it was being paid off faster. Thanks, Monica.
Thank you. Could you state your name, ma'am?
I didn't choose, I would go for the referendum because this is a very important project, and I want people to all be aware of it. We're going to do as much as we can to get the word out, and I hope those here will also do that. But I want people to go in there and vote. This has been on the books for like 20 years. Having the alternative approval process, I mean, it's okay, it works for a lot of things, but for me, I want people to actually look at it, learn about it, and actually make their vote on it. So that's why I would look for the referendum instead.
Good evening. My name is Bill Laird, and Carl, I'd like to thank you for the hard work that you've done and the great presentation.
Thank you.
I think that every community needs a vision, and I would say that this is a very good vision for our community needs a vision, and I would say that this is a very good vision for our community. We've talked about safety, but the railway is a psychological barrier to the waterfront, and one of the attractions of our community is the trail that we've all spent, well, certain parts of our community have spent, certain parts of our community have spent time and effort developing, and this will open it up. And our CP rep here tonight spoke eloquently, and I'm wondering if CP would provide a statement in support of the underpass, because you just explained to us, operator, and many of us have seen that same problem down at the thrift store, and I'm surprised we haven't had more events there. So I believe it would be useful if we had that. So thank you, and thank you to the staff.
Thank you, sir, for your comments. I take my approach. We are discussing this project as CP's support for it. We have been in long-term discussions with the city, and our view of it was when the city is ready to move, we're ready to move with them. The city has signaled its intention to proceed with the referendum, and we will stand with the city and speak to the project as needed as that process occurs. Project as needed as that process occurs.
Any other questions? Any other questions or comments?
Bob Bricilo, what happens if the referendum
A little bit. If the referendum fails, the project is likely done. That's the short answer. Because we're going to lose the grant funding that we have. We're going to, and my own view is that the political groundswell that would be needed to resurrect the project probably won't be there. Anybody else?
More than anybody else, and it'll certainly have a negative financial impact. But we certainly feel that, as just to reiterate what everybody else has said already, we think it's really important that this gets done. The foundation is built for it, and I think the only thing that would really stop any of this is a lack of knowledge from the citizen.
Thank you, Carl. That was a great presentation. I, for one, am fully in support of it all. Is what you've heard tonight, what you've seen tonight, is there enough information here to help you make an informed decision? Would you vote on this project one way or the other based on the information that you've heard tonight? How would you vote? So my point is, that's the key. So my point is, that's the key, right? It makes total sense. There isn't a downside at all. Is the city anticipating the costs are going to go down in the next few years? Probably not. So the time is now. The time was 1987. That was the time to plant the tree. The next best time is today. Is the city anticipating the costs are going to go down in the next few years? Probably not. So the time is now. The time was 1987. That was the time to plant the tree. The next best time is today. So I just, that's the key, is to get the information out, whether it's through the city, through the people here, talking to your friends over coffee, but that's the key. It was 1987. That was the time to plant the tree. The next best time is today. So I just, that's the key, is to get the information out, whether it's through the city, through the people here, talking to your friends over coffee, but that's the key to success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Whether it's through the city, through the people here, talking to your friends over coffee, but that's the key to success. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Looks like not, so anybody else? Looks like not.